So I brought this skeleton in because I wanted to show you an example of something. So I have a muscle shown by this pink tape that's running from the sternum up towards the mastoid process. Now, in the human, this would be the sternocleidomastoid. But in the cat, this is the sternomastoid. And when we're thinking about the function of these structures, I wanted to show you kind of an exercise that we would normally do in lab, and that is we would tape those muscles. And so if I tape this muscle like this, and then I contracted the muscle, what happens when I contract a muscle? I shorten it. So if I were to shorten this muscle, what's it going to do? It's going to turn the head, and it's going to bring this part of the head down towards this part. It's shortening that muscle, and it's bringing those two pieces, the origin and the insertion, closer together. So if I was the skeleton, okay, and I contracted my sternomastoid, in a sense I'm a human, it'd be a sternocleidomastoid, but we're using sternomastoid since we're using comparative vertebrate anatomy terms. Suppose I contracted the one on this side. What's going to happen? I'm going to take my mastoid process, I'm going to bring it closer to my sternum. I'm turning my head, but I'm also kind of bringing it up. This is one of the most complicated muscles that we're learning because the function of it is actually like a multifaceted function. It's not just, oh, it brings this closer to this. It doesn't just bring your chin down or your head up or your head sideways. It brings it sideways and down. If I contracted this one, it does that. If I contract them both, it does this. And you can see them right there. My sternocleidomastoid. Okay. So enough of that, but this is actually a great thing to practice to try to figure out functions of muscles. So imagine, let's say I had another one that ran from here to here. What would that be? So right here we're looking at the scapula. This is below the spine, so this would be infraspinous fossa. Up here is above the spine, so that's the supraspinous fossa. So running like this would be my supraspinatus. Running from here would be my infraspinatus. Subscapularis is all the way down here and it runs to up there. But what's this guy? Running from the bottom of the scapula here to the humerus. Think about what happens when I contract that. It's going to bring the arm in like this. Now, for a tetrapod like a cat that's walking on all fours, it's going to be slightly different. Things are shifted a little bit. And so this muscle is going to bring the humerus posteriorly, and it's going to adduct it to the body. It's going to add it back to the body. But it's going, when you're trying to think of functions, use yourself as an example. Where's that muscle on me if I was the cat? And what happens if I shorten that muscle, just like I did with my sternomastoid? What happens if I bring that insertion and origin closer together? All right. If I have muscles that are running here, what happens if they contract? Oh, goodness. Okay. Something like my deltoids that run from here to here. They shorten. You bring them closer together. What did I just do to my arm? I abducted it. Okay. So that would have been a good exercise that we could have done in person if we had the ability to. The next thing I want to show you are patterns that we have with our muscles. So I've drawn the muscles first over here I kind of color-coded them just to kind of make things hopefully a little bit easier for you. I have a few that I drew in white because they're just maybe the easiest ones to look at. The first one is the one we were just talking about, running from the sternum. And it's running up to where my mastoid processes would be on the back of the skull. So this is my sternomastoid. Sternomastoid. This one we've talked about before. This was my clavotrapezius. All right, I pointed that out in the video, so I'm just kind of showing it to you here. And then actually that runs posteriorly, and then everything on the top here would be your pectoralis muscles. But we're working our way anteriorly towards the chin. So this muscle was my sternomastoid, and they're like my bookends. If I look within, my purple muscle is running from the sternum up to my hyoid bone. From the sternum up to the hyoid bone. So that's my sternohyoid. Sternohyoid in purple. If I were to take my sternomastoid and move them off to the side, you would see it running all the way down to the sternum in purple. It's not actually purple, remember, but it's purple here. I cut my sternohyoid on this left side, your right, and you can see there's two other muscles deep to that. When we looked in here, we saw that we had the trachea and this, the voice box, which is actually the larynx, that's the right anatomical terminology. My larynx and my trachea as this cartilaginous structure, and I saw these two muscles running right alongside of it. I also pointed out to you that we had a gland in here that was my thyroid gland. And so one of these muscles, the one that's in orange here, is running from the sternum up to that thyroid gland region. So that's my sternothyroid. The other one is running from that thyroid region up to the hyoid bone, so that's my thyrohyoid. These names are great. They're exactly describing where they're running and how they're running. Running across here in blue, coming to my hyoid bone, and from this region here, I told you there was a styloid process on the skull deep to that. That's my stylohyoid in blue. And remember, there's also a jugular vein, or a transverse vein that goes across. And so that muscle is actually running underneath that transverse vein. That's a good orientation to try to figure out where you're at. Always look for that transverse vein. Next, when we got further up here, we had these two big muscles on the outside. That was my masseter muscles. My masseter muscles. And I told you we actually had two glands in there. The first one was the mandibular gland that was sitting right around here. You don't need to know it. And the other one was the parotoid gland that was sitting a little higher up. Those two glands kind of blocked us from seeing the bottom part of my masseter muscle, but I was able to show it to you further up here as it got further up on the head. When that muscle contracts, it closes the jaw. It helps you macerate your food. Masseter muscle macerates your food. Running on an angle with the jaw, you have your digastric muscle. Digastric muscle. Deep to the digastric muscle, shown in red here, that was my mylohyoid. It runs to the hyoid region. So it does run down here to the hyoid region like that. And it's obviously on both sides, the mylohyoid. The mylohyoid is deep to the digastric. Now I cut the mylohyoid off of this side, your right side, my left side. So I've cut the mylohyoid off here, and we're looking deep now to the mylohyoid. And when we look deep to the mylohyoid, we see four more muscles. One of those muscles is running from the hyoid up to the chin. And I told you that genio means chin. So this is the geniohyoid in yellow, the geniohyoid. The next one we had was running in the same direction as the geniohyoid, but it was deeper. And if I go deeper, I go into the board, I go way deep into here, I'm going to sooner or later end up in the oral cavity. And when I'm in the oral cavity, I'm by the tongue. And glossus means tongue. Glossus means tongue. So all three of these deep muscles, in orange, green, and purple, are going to have glossus in the name. Let's go back out to this yellow muscle real quick. This was the geniohyoid. Geniohyoid. Runs from the hyoid up to the chin. This one in orange is running along the same path. So I had the geniohyoid Now I have the genioglossus. Genioglossus. Genioglossus runs from this area here all the way up to the chin. Genioglossus. Running from this area up here by the chin down towards this kind of ear region. It's actually, sorry, not the ear region, but it would be down towards the base of the chin, or towards the lateral side. This area, remember right here, we had the stylo process. So this is my styloglossus in green, running towards that stylo process. And the last one I have was kind of hard to see on the cat, shown in purple here. This was my hyoglossus. Hyoglossus. It's running towards the hyoid bone. So always remember, what are they running towards? We're running towards the chin in orange, so that's the genioglossus. We're running towards the stylo process, so that's the styloglossus. We're running towards the hyoid bone, so in purple that's the hyoglossus. All three of those deep muscles have glossus in the name, and you just have to remember what they're running towards. Superficial to that in yellow, that was my geniohyoid. I'm running towards the chin, genio, I'm coming from the hyoid. Superficial to the geniohyoid in red was my mylohyoid. Superficial to the mylohyoid on the sides here were my digastric muscles. The masseter muscles were more off on the lateral sides of the cat. I then show you over here that ultimately what we're doing is forming patterns. Okay? Going back to these patterns that we have. Recall that I have my stylohyoid in blue here. Stylohyoid. Then I have my styloglossus. Stylohyoid. And then running on the outside here, I have my geniohyoid. And I also have deep to that my genioglossus. So here I have a triangle that I've just formed. Here's one side formed by these two muscles. Here's the other side. Formed by the styloglossus, and here's the other one formed by the stylohyoid. So I have this big triangle. Then I have another two small triangles within those. I have one here that's formed by the genioglossus, styloglossus, and then in purple my hyoglossus. And then down here I have another one formed by the stylohyoid, the styloglossus, and the hyoglossus. So I have these patterns of these muscles. And when you looked at the cat, you saw these triangles. If not, go back to that video and look once again, the triangles are there. And they help you remember what these muscles are, which ones are running in which directions. And also, like I mentioned before, where they're going is in the name. Glossus are deep, genio runs to the chin, hyo runs to the hyoid bone, stylo runs to the stylo process. Stylohyoid is coming from the stylo process to the hyoid bone. Geniohyoid is running from the hyoid bone up to the chin. So I show you them up here as well, kind of doing the same thing that we just did right here. And the color codes match up with the color codes that we have right there. So hopefully those patterns help you remember what muscles are what. Now one of the things that we had in that video is sitting right about here. We had some arteries and veins coming out. And so it was really hard for me to show you the hyoglossus. But in reality, actually, those came out, if you go back to that video, right here. And so I was able to pinch it with my forceps on this far end. Because over here, this was all just covered by those arteries and veins. But if you remember the pattern, you should be able to remember the muscles. These we're able to see the stylohyoid beneath the jugular, the transverse vein. The styloglossus was fairly easy to see. The genioglossus is fairly easy to see. And you know that the other one connecting the side of the triangle is going to be the hyoglossus. That's covered by some of those arteries, veins, and nerves. So I know that you can't see things too well given that this is virtual, but knowing the patterns, I think you can easily learn this on your own. All right?